This is John Halterman, and I'm here today with Mark McMillion, and Mark owns the company McMillion Leadership. And so Mark is our featured guest today on Community Difference Makers. Mark, welcome to the program.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Mark is a West Point grad, and like I mentioned, he owns the company McMillion Leadership. And Mark, tell me a little bit about how you ended up at West Point.
I grew up in Summersville, West Virginia, down the road a little ways, and I was in high school. I played sports, did well in classes. I wanted to do a little more than just academics. I knew I wasn't going to play at the next level. I sought out the extra challenge that West Point offered. Worked hard, I made it. I applied to the academy, was accepted. I received a nomination from then Congressman Wise and Senator Byrd. The toughest 4 years of my life, hands down, enormous challenge for me, but I got through it.
Sure.
From there, that really ignited, that spark of passion for leadership was there all along, but at West Point it burst into full flame. And from there, I started making an active study of leadership in addition to the practice that we did every day in the Army.
Sure.
Active duty, 22 years, I made a lot of leadership decisions. I made the hard decisions that people's livelihood, whether they're going to stay in the Army or get out of the Army, whether they're going to be promoted, sometimes life or death decisions. I've made those hard decisions, and I married that up with that passion, the reading. You see some of my favorite books on the table in front of us. I love talking about leadership. I love reading about leadership. I like writing about leadership.
One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, we talk about great universities, Harvard and Yale, and we forget though that the military academies, in my mind, still is the best universities in America today. Because not only does it provide great academic skills, but like you said, it's the missing component, which is leadership. And that leadership is something that cannot even be measured most of the time when we're going through it. So, I know you've learned a lot about leadership through West Point. You mentioned 22 years in the Army. Tell us a little bit about how you're taking those skills, those fundamentals that you've learned, and now teaching people out here in West Virginia, companies in West Virginia, and making a difference.
That's a great question. And that's the difference I bring, is that experience, that real world, having been in those leadership positions. I remember reading Good to Great, one of the leadership classics by Jim Collins. Fantastic stuff, a little abstract. I remember when I was in my 20s reading books like this, I get very excited, fired up, go to work the next day and say, okay, I'm ready, but I couldn't make that connection between that abstract concept and where the rubber meets the road. That's what I do now. Because of that experience, I can read these books. I can read Warren Bennis, Leaders. I can read Patrick Lencioni, The Ideal Team Player. I think we've all read Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I can break that down into everyday use. What a person has to do on that daily basis.
So basically, you're taking the things that are being taught and allowing people to use those on daily life. Because you said it correct. Anybody can get excited about attending a workshop or reading a book. But the reality of it is, if we can't take that enthusiasm and then apply it to what we do daily to make our jobs easier or to make the people around us better, then it really is not a big deal.
Exactly.
And so now tell us, what are some of the companies or the types of companies that benefit the most from the services that you're providing?
Leadership transcends almost every organization. It's embedded in any organization where there are people. It is the people business. You have to marry that up with subject matter expertise. So I came out of the Army, my subject matter expertise was in military operations. That's hard to get a job. But what I can bring is that leadership expertise, and I can work with that manufacturing company. Just started a program with Swanson Manufacturing up the road in Morgantown. And I can help them apply that leadership, help their leaders acquire those skills to make those companies run smoother and more productively.
Sure. Well, one of the things that I love is that I say this all the time. I've had the luxury of having a personal coach for the last 10 years. And the biggest mistake I feel I ever made in my life was not hiring a coach early enough. I thought I couldn't afford it. But the reality of it is, you really can't afford not to have a coach. Because the one thing that coaches do is accountability. And I think accountability is one of the biggest principles that we all lack in today's world. Because it's easy to go around and have a lot of fun, but to have someone hold you accountable, and somebody, especially somebody who has the experience and the knowledge. Tell me how you're holding people accountable.
Well, and without question, accountability is absolutely fundamental and core to leadership. I've never given a leadership presentation or class that have not talked about communication and accountability. But when the idea is when you're paying someone to work with you, you realize, and they ask you those questions, and then you build up plan together, and then you move forward, you know they're going to come back. They're going to follow up with you. They're going to say, okay, we talked about X, Y, and Z. What did you do since we talked last? And you're going to feel pretty foolish. You're paying this guy X amount of dollars, and you're saying, well, I didn't do anything.
Yeah. No, that is huge. And I say this all the time because sometimes my friends will ask me, hey, why do you have a coach at this stage of your life? And I said, you know what? It doesn't matter how good you think you are. You always need somebody to be accountable to. But knowing that you've got to be on that phone or be face to face, and they ask you, hey, did you do what we talked about? That is huge, huge. Now, there's a lot of coaches out there doing good things, but tell me, you mentioned leadership, you mentioned, accountability, and you also mentioned communications. Any other things that you're teaching people that's bringing great value? Because, I don't know if here in West Virginia, we've ever had a leadership coach. And I love it that we have a West Point grad, someone locally grown, someone who understands the people, but have been trained globally. So tell me what other value you bring.
John, you just touched on it yourself. And the fact that you continue to embrace that is evidence of your own success. That drive to get better. The good enough is not good enough. The status quo, things as they are not sufficient. Part of what makes leaders great is that constant striving to get better, whether it's a better manufacturing process, whether it's a better way to do business, a better way to greet customers, a better way. There's always a better way.
Sure.
Sometimes it doesn't cost a lot of money to make a better way, but it costs time and effort, cognitive engagement, that thinking process. Sometimes so many leaders get so caught up in doing. They don't take time to stop and think about things.
Sure.
And those are one of those things that make great leaders, is that someone who takes that time, that pause. How can we do this better? And things will come out. And employees, once those communication channels are open from the top level to the bottom level, and that flows both ways, employees will come up with great ideas to do things better.
Oh, absolutely. And we all know communication, when you have it, everything's wonderful. But when it breaks down, of course, no one's happy. And so I love all the things you're saying, Mark, and I'm super impressed with Mark. I think Mark has a brilliant mind. And like I said, I'm just amazed that we're able to do this here in West Virginia. Mark, how do people get a hold of you? If they want to get involved, because clearly in my mind, it's not an expense, it's an investment in someone's future. Anybody who wants to get better and they looking towards somebody who can make them better and hold them accountable, how do they get a hold of you?
It's very easy. First is my website, McMillionLeadership.com. MC Million, like $1 million. Mark at McMillionLeadership.com is my email address. My phone number is 304-838-2274. If I can't answer, I will call you back. I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Okay, great. Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming in today. And folks, definitely if you're looking for somebody who's going to provide you leadership skills, teach you communications, and you want a better tomorrow, definitely look for people like Mark. So, Mark, I really appreciate your mind and I appreciate what you're doing, because no doubt about it, Mark is making a difference with people here in West Virginia. So, thanks again, buddy.
Thank you, John.